as women, we have archetypally, we already have the blood mysteries of the feminine, meaning we have menstruation and childbirth and pregnancy and then the menopause. So we are already embodying the archetype. So it's easier for us to become initiated and to move. You could say it's easier. I mean, men don't have these initiations, certainly in the West.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who's out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode.
Welcome to The Exploding Human. My name is Bob Nickman. Today we journey to the coast of Ireland to speak with Benig Mauger. She is a Jungian therapist, and we are going to be talking about how a connection to nature and the spiritual world can help heal emotional wounds. But first, I would like to invite you to visit my website, theexplodinghuman.com. There you can listen to episodes, read synopses, see photos of my guests, and there's a little bio on myself. There's also a YouTube channel where you can listen. That is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. As I said, my guest today is Benig Mauger. She lives on the coast of Ireland. She is part French and part Irish and part citizen of the world. And her study of Jungian therapy has informed her work as a therapist. She's worked with women during pregnancy, and we talk about what goes on in the womb with a baby and a mother, the difference between men and women in terms of a spiritual journey. And we're going to talk about her new book, The Soul and the Sea. And I love talking about how therapy and spirituality can meet in a place which is even more powerful than one or the other alone. So let's meet her. Here she is. This is Benig Mauger. Good evening to you and good morning to me. I'm in Los Angeles, and you are on the Wild Atlantic Way in Ireland. I am so happy to meet you, Benig.
I'm very happy to meet you, Bob, and to talk to somebody on the other side of the continent or the world in some ways.
Yeah, we really are on the other side of the world, and yet we're interested in a lot of the same things, which I'm very happy about. And why don't you give a little bit of background? I may have done this already in the intro, but I really want to hear your a little, brief history of how you arrived at where you are, because I know you studied, I know you're a psychotherapist and studied Jungian psychology, but just let's get a little bit of background on your path to where you are today and how you wrote this book.
Sure, yes. Well, I've been a Jungian psychotherapist now for more than 30 years. I was always involved in some form of healing or therapy work. I did my training in the UK, England, and I was very involved in healing childbirth and helping women and couples work through the experience of birth. Then I wrote my first book. It's now 20 years old, which is amazing, called Songs from the Womb, which was a kind of classic, which looked at the formative impact of life in the womb and the birth experience and the spiritual aspects of it against the background of Jung. So then I went on to I was training as well at that time in psychoanalytic psychotherapy. And Jung was part of that, but not the whole of it, as in it was a very eclectic training, which incorporated others like Freud and Klein and all of that. And so I had private practice with clients in the UK. Then I moved back to Ireland, which is where I was born. My folks are French or Bretons and came here in the early 50s as refugees, really. So I was born here, and I have a dual nationality, French and Irish, and dual language. I mean, I speak, my first language is French and English, obviously, because we live here. And then I moved back to Ireland in 2005 and wrote my second two books, and also just had a private practice and saw people, for therapy. And then, but all this time I was developing my spiritual practice because it was kind of in my soul. It was something that it was important to me. I was always much more interested in Jung and the transcendent function because he incorporated the spiritual realm. And so fast forward, my second book was about the father, the impact of the father on a child, and the formative impact of the father and how important he is in the life of a child. And then and how we are fathered and mothered influences how we are in our relationships. So that book was about relating to an extent. And then my last book before this one was called Love in a Time of Broken Heart, which was very much about the experience of heartbreak and what that does. It opens a sort of sacred initiation into unconditional love. And also, again, the archetypes of the anima and the animus. And then fast forward to this book, The Soul and the Sea, which it's a very personal book, but it's also how I teach, is to bring myself in. And the central message of the book is that at this time of spiritual awakening, we are needing to move beyond psychology if we want to for emotional healing to happen. So it's a book that incorporates the healing power of nature and our own soul and the spiritual aspects of that, mixed in with the Jung as well, which is still very much the formative side of it. The Soul and the Sea has just been published, actually, a couple of weeks ago. So here I am.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And publishing another book. That's really an accomplishment. So not to be taken lightly, folks, because it's not easy to write a book. I'll tell you that right now.
Mm-hmm. It's not, but at the same time, I feel I'm a writer by nature. So it was always a pleasure for me to write. It's a creative process for me. It developed that way, that I found that was my medium, writing. So I actually love it. I love writing.
Well, I do too. When it comes from that place where I'm actually discovering things myself as I'm writing. Like, there's an intent to get a message across, but then all of a sudden, somewhere inside, new things sort of clarify and manifest as you're doing it. And that, I guess, that's the creative process. But especially when it's personal, and I think that's really what somebody who's reading a book can grasp onto in a way that when it's impersonal and just sort of semi-factual or factual or whatever, the person's own experience does come through. And I'm guessing that's what's going on in your book.
For sure. Yes.
Yeah. I want to talk about something. I want to talk about the womb for a second. I have two experiences that I will relate to you about my own birth and pre-birth. I'll do my birth first. I remember, and I have actually talked about this before on the podcast, but I'm so fascinated by this experience that I remembered all through my childhood, and I never told anybody because I thought people would think I was strange or they wouldn't understand. So, and it wasn't something that people talked about. I remember my birth. It wasn't like I remember it like I went to the grocery store the other day and bought some apples. It's not like that. It was, I remember being in this sort of vast, dark place, this extreme force, powerful force, transported me. And I was intensely, it was intense. I was sort of scared, but not really scared. And then I had this moment. It was an internal smile. And the thought was, oh yeah, this again. And then I was born, I guess, or maybe that was, as I was coming out or right after I came out. And it was this big smile, like this, almost a chuckle, like this is going to be fun. Because I remember it. Now I don't, okay. So that being said, that was an experience that I carried with me, and I finally started talking about it when I got a little older, and I find out that other people have had experiences like that. And then I went, I think this was through a hypnotherapy thing, and I can't remember how this, it must have been that I did some, not I did past life regression with a person. And what I remember being in the womb was, I just remember my mother being in this apartment that was kind of starkly, didn't have a lot of stuff in it. It was kind of stark. And my dad was traveling at the time. And now this is information I knew about. So she was alone a lot when she was pregnant with me. And the overwhelming feeling was that she was really scared. And now how much of that is accurate or not, or is it based on the fact that my mom was kind of a scared person, through my childhood in a lot of ways. But it was a lot of empathy that I got for her, from this experience. So those were two things that kind of happened to me. But, like you say, how powerful the womb is and what's going on in there with people. Sometimes we just come out with stuff.
Well, I think the womb is our first school. We learn about life, and we learn about what to expect. In Jungian terms, what life in the womb is, and immediately after birth, is about humanizing the archetypes. So when we're in the womb, we have a sense of what, like Jung himself said, man is born with the contours of his life already present. And so that we're not born a blank slate. We already have the history of the ancestors as it's transmitted to us in the womb. And also whatever's going on for the mother at the time, and the father's energy, but through the mother. It's filtered through the mother. So I was a birth teacher for many, many years, as in I was preparing women for birth, and now I do a lot of healing of birth experiences, because my first book was about that, and it's still my first love in a way, that technology has replaced nature to the detriment of the human soul. And for many people, it's a wound that they have to heal. Both the baby, not just women, the baby and the mother. So the child kind of learns from his mother what life is going to be like, and then later how the child is received is a huge thing. Like my journey began in that sense because I started Jungian analysis when I was 30 years old. I was doing a training at the time, and but my birth experience was very formative for me, because I was, and this is in my book, of course, I was very premature, 32 weeks, therefore 3 pounds in weight, and in an incubator for 2 months. So that in itself was part of my formation, obviously. And in some ways, maybe it was my soul path to bring awareness to the importance of this time. And of course, we can work through our birth experience, and it's not a case that if we have a bad birth that we're finished, not at all. I mean, there are many challenges in life, but what I have found in my practice of 30 years, that many of our patterns go back to our very formative years. Because if you think about it, and I'm sure you know this, the first relationship with our parents creates a template for all future relationships.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing, the worldview that we get as as babies and then as children. It's so powerfully ingrained. It's and sometimes it's not really an accurate worldview. It's just a family worldview based on the family. And when those things start, there's a certain discomfort as you get older. And I have kids, so I've seen it in them too, where you're almost upset with your parents for their limiting beliefs. Like, how could you limit me like this? The world's not like what you said.
I know. And then we become parents ourselves and we do exactly the same thing, unless we're quite, aware. But having said that, I feel that it is part of the human condition to experience, challenges or, difficult times or traumas or whatever, in terms of help and their spirit. I see it that these are spiritual tasks of empowerment rather than crippling, designed to cripple us. Do you know what I mean? That it's helping us grow and build spiritual muscle all the time.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was talking about with you before we started recording, that the things that we basically don't like while we're in them and while they're happening, and they're very difficult and painful, and that later on you can look back and go, oh, that was really valuable. That brought me to this other place. I think the most powerful experience for people, empowering experience, is that point, and I think most people have this, where you're transitioning from growing up with a family to being an autonomous adult, realizing the cavalry is not coming. I got to do this myself. And that is a really, it's disheartening, but it's also empowering. And the people that can't make that transition or have an extreme difficulty in life, whether they weren't given the tools or they don't, have the wherewithal to do that. And sometimes that period of time takes a while, and then they get it. But it saddens me when I see somebody that can't, or hasn't been able to do that. I think most people do figure that out, but those who can't really need the assistance of somebody like yourself. That's where I see the value in certainly in talk therapy, and then as your book talks about, there's more even beyond that.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And Jung himself said that in order for us to individuate, which is come into our sense of inner wholeness, so become whole human beings, we have to leave the pack, as in leave our parents emotionally and mentally. And yes, some people find it very, very hard, of course, but it's also a natural process. And I think we're guided along the way, either through books or, mentors, spiritual mentors or therapists, because I do feel that there is an innate push to live our lives.
And I know that some cultures, some people would call them primitive cultures. I don't really see it that way, but where they would, a young man, for example, would be sent out into the wilderness to survive for a period of time, trial by fire, basically, and come back, go out a boy and come back a man. There was literally a formal time to do that with young men in particular. I'm not sure that it was done with women. Maybe about now that I think about it.
Well, the thing is that this this is something I've talked about a lot in the various books, particularly the one in childbirth and that. But you see, as women, we have archetypally, we already have the blood mysteries of the feminine, meaning we have menstruation and childbirth and pregnancy and then the menopause. So we are already embodying the archetype. So it's easier for us to become initiated and to move. You could say it's easier. I mean, men don't have these initiations, certainly in the West. There aren't those rituals that there are in or have been and still are in some societies, more traditional societies, where the boys are sent away with an older man to learn how to survive, as you say. And so it is a bit harder. I think it's harder because of the nature of the feminine archetype and what I've just said about the, embodying it.
I never thought about it like that, about the idea of blood in all those phases of a woman's life. I never thought about it that way, but it makes complete sense now that you're saying it. So apparently men and women are different.
I think they are. And we carry the babies in our wombs, and, it's a very embodied experience. And, from a spiritual perspective, I think it's often said that women are closer to the spiritual, and they teach men. They bring spirituality to the man if he doesn't resist too much.
Well, I have to agree with that. I mean, I've just seen it in my own relationship with my wife, because she's gone through all those phases. All those, that's probably not the right word. She's gone through all those experiences, and there's a knowing that she has about certain things. And I'm like, how do you know that? She goes, I don't know how I know it. I just know it. And so I have to listen to that, because most of the time she's right on the money when it isn't influenced by some sort of a, trauma from the past or something like that. When it's like a pure sort of knowing, and she'll know stuff way before me. And it really is quite extraordinary, especially things about kids. Mm-hmm. The bond. I mean, I guess that makes sense. Somebody grows inside of you, you're going to have a connection to them in a way that I don't. I love that too. And I think that my experience is that her view of the rest of humanity is a much gentler one than mine, and a much more intuitive and kinder one. Not that I'm not a kind person, but there's something, that masculine energy is a little bit different. It's just a little bit different. It's, let's call it hunters, and people, go out and kill the bison. We're primitive in that way. And I think Jung tapped into that, that he tapped into the primitive part and the part that is, I guess you would call it the higher self. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about in your book, what we can learn as we get older, as we open this stuff up inside of ourselves, if we're not afraid.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's a process. And I also think that one of the main reasons I think that people ask me what made you write the book. It was gestating in me, because I've always been writing about healing. But it felt important at this particular time. It was written during the pandemic, the first lockdown, when everybody was made to stay at home, etc. This was the perfect opportunity for me to totally go within and bring out what was there. It's because I feel that this time in our evolution is throwing humanity back onto himself and herself, in terms of taking responsibility for our lives, our health, and how we want to live, and our spiritual evolution, because we would have been taught to look outside of ourselves for happiness, love, health, or something. And now that's not working, because all these institutions are collapsing. So it's time for a change. And that's what I call, and many others call, the sacred feminine, the return of the feminine, and the qualities of nature, nurturing, being together, being in the heart, your own intuition, all of that. And so the soul and the sea is very much about that. It's about how we need, in order to heal, we need to develop a spiritual practice along with the in-depth psychological work, so the two can work together. And Jung had that. I mean, Jung had many periods of time okay, he was a man of his time, but he already wrote, man is in search of his soul, that we were separated out somehow from our own divinity, our own roots in the divine, and our own soul, our instinctual natures. So the Soul of the Sea is very much about the power of the land. I mean, it's written here and around where I live, and the writing came through for me in my periods of walking by the beach, in my meditations, in my dreams. You were talking about dreams. And dreams are a huge part of how we can heal ourselves because it's the voice of our soul, unedited by the ego. I don't want to get too technical about the ego or anything like that, but
I don't have one, so I don't really know anything about it.
Neither do I. Yeah. But I think now is the time to actually learn that we have immense power. We have immense power in the psyche to heal ourselves and to do good, obviously.
Well, it's such an interesting thing about dreams, because you may deny something or avoid something in your waking hours,
but the dream will not lie.
Won't lie. Yeah. What happened? Some of them are I love dreams. I find them to be even the nightmares I've had, which have been numerous over the years, if you want to call them that. Yeah. The dream / experience. Sometimes the dreams are more intense, and you wake up going, "I just had an experience," and it takes sometimes hours to kind of come back to functioning, in a quote normal way during the day, because the experience is so intense. And I did some dream analysis in therapy a number of years ago. I was instructed, write them down and come and let's talk about them. Yeah. And what I realized was a lot of the things that I thought were bad dreams were actually really not bad dreams. They were positive, even though they felt kind of weird at the time when I was having them. When we started talking about them, and not that somebody else can actually super accurately analyze a dream, but there are some sort of basic things that were pointed out to me, that maybe it wasn't this, maybe it was you being strong. The fact that you were underwater and not drowning, maybe that meant something completely different than you were drowning, because you weren't drowning, you were breathing underwater. So, that's sort of a very obvious, analogy to being strong when there's pressure on your life.
Yeah, for sure. And dreams generally, there's a lot in chapter 8 of the book. It's called The Purple Room. I talk a lot about dreams, but dreams generally come to bring about balance in our life. So, for example, in many of the studies they've done, somebody called Bruno Bettelheim wrote a lot about dreams. They found that the dreams of people in concentration camps who were dying and, not in a good place for obvious reasons, they had wonderful dreams. So what is that? Well, it was to keep them alive, to give them hope that there was. And similarly, you can think that everything is going fine, as you've said, and you'll have some kind of a nightmare, what you think is a nightmare, which is basically telling you, pay attention. There is more in your unconscious. So you might dream that your father, you might come to me and say, I had a wonderful childhood. My father was so kind and was a wonderful father. Or you could say the same about your mother. And then one day you come in and you say, I have a terrible dream. I dreamt that my father was a tramp and a drunk. And we'd have to look at, well, of course he's not. We know he's not a tramp or a drunk, but what could that mean? Basically means to bring balance. So to bring your conscious ego to understand that you're over-idealizing your father. And you need to see him as a rounded human being. And in doing that, you release some of the psychic energy that's caught up in the idealization.
I was just thinking about some, I guess they were somewhat recurring dreams when I was probably around 9 or 10. And that's kind of the age when a kid starts to realize that their parents aren't gods and that they're fallible, and that they can also die themselves, the parents and the kid, that there's a realization around that age. And I was having these dreams where this was a recurring dream where I would, I can still feel, I'm laughing because I can still feel it when I talk about it. I would go up, there was a building that was kind of in disrepair, extreme disrepair. And I would go up these steps and they would collapse behind me. And I would be up on this sort of, second floor. And my dad was down at the bottom and he couldn't help me. And I had this dream a couple of times. Now that could mean a lot of different things, but it certainly was maybe this all-powerful father can't help this kid. Or maybe I felt that my dad was, inadequate in certain ways. I don't know exactly what that was, but it certainly speaks to that archetype of the kid going off into the world. And then, later when I got into therapy, I had a lot of dreams about crumbling foundations, collapsing, things and, floors. And then I had one, this was so intense. There was a live electrical wire underground, but it had an intelligence to it. And it was like sort of slithering underground, and I'm trying to avoid it. And it's this intense electrical power that could kill me. And I'm running from it. It's popping up and trying to get me. And I guess it didn't because I'm here. So, but I remember this dream going, whoa, that's just like there's danger underneath the surface of something. Or I don't know. What do you think of that one? That was a really intense one. I had that more than once, actually.
I think that it's very hard to work with dreams like this cold, because the method that one uses is you have to get the context, you have to get the date, the context, what was happening in that person's life at that time, and you have to get the emotional associations and all of that. So it would depend on what was happening at that time. But I do know that, and again, this is in my book as examples of the power of dreams. I do know that we can have healing dreams. For example, I had one where I actually in real life lost a baby in the womb, in early pregnancy. And I was in analysis at the time, and it was very, very traumatic experience. And it took a long time to sort of work it out. And then one day I got an amazing dream, which I brought to my analyst, in which my baby was perfectly formed in someone's hand. And I knew the hand to be God's hand. I was being shown this child. Oh. And somehow it was very moving, and it was a healing dream, very sacred type of, as you said yourself, we can have certain dreams that we know are living in us and we've experienced them. And then there are others that are a bit more sort of like fuzzy and fragmented. But that was one of those dreams. And I think it came for healing.
That's quite beautiful. See, I love that power that we have inside of us to do that. And I just realized, here's what I'm thinking now on my electrical thing, Dream Underground, that I was in therapy, and I was digging underneath the surface, and my ego didn't want it. And it was like, there's too much. It's too much down there. You got to be careful. I
was also thinking, now I don't know you at all, and I would need, but what came to me was also that you have power, that you have untapped power somewhere.
Yeah. Okay, let's go with that one. I like that one.
That's a nice one. Yeah, let's go with that one. It's much better.
And it won't destroy me. I'll be able to harness it rather than be, zapped. Which is interesting because right after that, I started to do very well in my career and personal life. after I went through this period of time. So I think you're right. And you don't even know me, but you do. You know me.
You are, you see.
If you want to send me a bill for this, you can.
I'm happy to talk about my book and have people get hold of it and
Yeah, let's talk about the let's mention the title again and where they can get it, because it's a fascinating work, and I like that it's very personal in addition to being informative.
It's called The Soul and the Sea. I think that you can get it anywhere. You can get it on Amazon.com, Amazon.uk, the Barnes and Noble, all of this. But you can, if listeners could be directed to my website, there's lots and lots of resources there that they can.
Great! What is your website?
My website is my name, www.benigmauger.com. You have my name, I think.
I do have your name. Your name is pronounced Benig Mauger.
Yeah.
But it's spelled Benig. That is a G, right? Yes, it is G. And Mauger is Mauger.
That's it, .com.
It's a soft G.
Yeah.
.com.
All small case, benigmauger.com. It's my website it'll take you to Soul Connections. I've had that website for a long time and I'm updating it and all the books. But anyway, the books are available wherever.
Well, the idea of healing beyond just talk therapy is really great. And I'm always a little bit reluctant to, not reluctant. The times I've done therapy, I've had 2 or 3 different ones, and only one of them approached the spiritual side.
Okay.
Out of the 3 people that I talked to, they were all very valuable people and offered quite a bit and helped me quite a bit. But only one of them really saw the whole person and the importance of nurturing the spiritual side.
Absolutely. And I think I'm glad you've said that, because to me that's the focus of this book. And that it's not a good idea anymore to look outside of ourselves all the time for answers or for healing. And yes, it is good. We do need guardians and guides and therapists, perhaps, for certain periods, but a dependency on such is wrong, I think, because a good therapist, certainly how Jung worked, is to put you in touch with your inner healer, how you can do healing for yourself and how you can tap into that archetype, which is the archetype of the wounded healer, which I'm sure you know about. Again, Jungian work uses myths and legends and stories to as metaphor for the human journey to profound healing. And there are lots of stories in my book, because as a writer, that's my nature. I use myself, but also a lot of stories in the books, so that it's easier for people. It's not cold and analytical and abstract. It's easier for people to relate to their everyday experiences that we all have, a common human journey.
You have some examples in your book of people that you've worked with? I'm always like, when I used to read the Freud stuff, and he would say, Q came to me and this was the problem. And I'm like, let's find out about Q, because this is a real person. Yeah.
Well, my style is, the first part of the book takes you, they're called rooms, red room, green room. That's just that you go into different rooms in your psyche. And my own story is laced through it composites of people I've worked with. But there's no, you fictionalize, you use composites. And part 2 is called Healing Rooms, where I do just that. The first one is the birth room. So I take the reader into the therapy room. But again, it's their stories, of people who would have had difficult birth experiences or something like that, and how we work through it. And the second room is called the life room, which is really about more dealing with relationships and intimate relationships and all of that. And the third room is called the death room. I had a real problem. I didn't know what to do about that room because I knew I wanted to deal with bereavement and loss, which is very real for all of us, most particularly as we get older. And I didn't know, I had a real problem calling it because I had birth, life, and then death. And I thought, how can I call it death room? Nobody will read it. But in fact, it works fine. It works very well. And also, Bob, I don't know whether you know that, but interlaced, I use poetry a lot. So I have the poetry of Rilke and Rumi in particular, sacred poetry, and a lot of quotes from the mystics. And because they're our teachers in many ways of how to attain this healing and connect with our own inner healer. So yeah, there are stories. To answer your question, there are stories.
Wonderful. I love that, and I love the idea that I love the fact that you use poetry, because there's something about a great poem that does speak to the heart and not just the mind. The way a poet can put words together will transport you to a new place that you can't even really quantify it with words. Actually, the words are just a vehicle to get to this other place, and it's quite extraordinary to me. The gifted poets just kind of blow me away. It's music. It's basically music.
Oh, it is. And if I might share a personal story in that respect, I had a client when I was a younger therapist, maybe 25 years ago or so, a male client who was sent to me by a Freudian colleague. He had been working with him for 5 years or something, and he said, he needs to see a woman. You have to see him. So anyway, he came to see me, but at the same time, he got the name of someone else. Sometimes that's done, where you can kind of shop for a therapist. You go for one session with each one and then decide who you want to see. So he came to me, and he was also going off to see a clinical psychologist who worked as part of the health service. So I encouraged him, and that was it. He went on his way. And then about a month later, he came back, and he said he wanted to work with me. And I said, what made you decide to work with me? And he said, this is exactly what he said. He said, well, she said to me, she would put me on tablets, drugs, and that she gets very good results. And you said you didn't know whether you could help me, and you talked about poetry.
Wow.
So I've come back to you, he said. Yeah, so it was brilliant. We did great work. We were together probably about 4 years or so.
Oh, and he's doing well somewhere, I hope. Yeah. You're smiling. I'm telling the audience that you're smiling right now. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today, and your early evening gift of your time is much appreciated. And I want to say that view of your out your window of the Irish coast is spectacular, and I can see why you live there and why you love it. I'm just picturing you early morning walking on the beach, barefoot, of course, and letting the energy of the sand and the soil come up through you and having that magnetic connection to the earth. That's what I'm picturing. Yeah.
And you would be right. It's great. And I hope if with the Soul and the Sea, it will take you to that part of Ireland, and you'll probably be looking at booking holidays to the Wild Atlantic Way. I probably should try and see, can I get paid by the tourism office here?
Spiritual tourism sounds like a good,
yes.
It's a whole new thing. Well, maybe it isn't, but it's a wonderful thing. Thanks so much. You have a beautiful evening. And how do they say, I know in England they say cheers. Cheers. What do you say there in Ireland?
We say, we just say, we don't have anything special, but
okay.
it's just like, have a good day, or how are you doing?
Oh, really?
Says,
At the end? At the end, you say how you doing?
At the end, you just say thanks a million.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks a million. I
and
appreciate.
Thanks to you. I really enjoyed talking to you. It's very easy communication, and I hope your listeners will find this helpful. And please come to my website, and we'll talk some more.
Fantastic. Thanks. Have a beautiful night.
Thank you.
Much appreciation for you folks listening to The Exploding Human. Check out the website, theexplodinghuman.com, the YouTube channel, The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. I want to thank Benig Mauger once again for visiting me here on The Exploding Human and all her wonderful insights. You can check her out, as we talked about in the episode, at benigmauger.com. And I will also put a link in the description. Have a fantastic day. Thank you.